We begin, though, this morning with a potential major turning point in New York's COVID response plan.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul is expected to announce her decision on the future of mask mandates in the state later this morning. The mask mandate for indoor spaces and businesses is set to expire tomorrow, potentially putting an end to the controversial 2-month policy enacted at the start of the Omicron wave. At the center of the debate, mandates inside New York schools. Now, 4 states have already dropped their mask mandates inside the classroom. Earlier this week, Oregon, New Jersey, Delaware, and Connecticut all decided to lift their mandates by next month at the latest. And in California, masks are no longer required indoors as of next week. But the CDC is warning it may not be time to drop mask mandates just yet.
Right now, our CDC guidance has not changed. We have and continue to recommend masking in areas of high and substantial transmission. That is essentially everywhere in the country in public indoor settings. We continue to recommend universal masking in our schools. And so our guidance has not changed. And what I will say is in this current moment, I'm pleased to say that about 96% of our children are in schools and that the masking has allowed them to be in school safely. That and getting our children vaccinated.
We have Dr. Amish Adalja standing by to break down the science around mask mandates. But first, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda, who is outside LaGuardia High School awaiting the governor's announcement. So, Emily, do we have an idea of what the governor is going to announce today? Could mask mandates be dropped inside New York schools?
Good morning. We'll likely get a firm answer in just a matter of hours. Governor Kathy Hochul will likely weigh in on 2 things, the mask mandates within businesses and mask mandates within schools. Sources tell us that she will likely extend the mask mandate for schools at least through the end of the month. But again, a more firm, confident answer will come from the governor herself at 11:15, a news conference scheduled for later this morning. One point I will note is she considers to express concerns over vaccination rates, particularly among young children, 5 to 11 years old. Here's more from the governor on that.
I'm going to continue looking at the metrics, and the one thing I'm asking all parents to do, and the pediatricians who advise them, let's get more children vaccinated so they have that suit of armor they need to be protected, not just against this variant, but this is our 3rd or 4th variant now. So I want to be optimistic. I am optimistic that we're trending in that direction, but I still need the time, and I'm assessing.
So taking a look at the numbers for kids between the ages of 5 and 11 years old, less than 1/3 of that age group has gotten at least 1 jab in protection against COVID-19. The number is slightly higher for the state of New York, but not by much, closer to 38%. Guys?
So, Emily, we know Governor Hochul met with teachers, parents, and superintendents to discuss how to move forward in the pandemic. What came out of that meeting?
So I will say this was a closed-door meeting, so we have limited insight around the exact conversation. But Governor Hochul says it was really aimed at really hearing from people, quote, on the ground, the teachers, the superintendents, the parents, about how they feel that they can keep kids in the classroom safely throughout the pandemic. And she says a top priority for her remains keeping kids in the classroom. We'll likely hear more about how she plans to do that again later this morning.
And Emily, New York is the latest state to consider dropping the mask mandate inside of schools. Earlier this week, neighboring New Jersey announced its statewide mandate will end March 7th, though individual schools can still choose to keep it in place. What has Governor Phil Murphy said about that decision? And are we seeing any schools that plan to keep the mandates, at least for now?
So Governor Murphy says balancing public health with trying to return to some semblance of normalcy is not an easy task, but he does feel that they can be relinquishing and reducing COVID-19 restrictions in a responsible manner, taking a look at the numbers. And clearly some other states feel the same way. You mentioned at the top Connecticut, Delaware, New Jersey, Oregon, among the states this week starting to announce plans to really roll back mask mandates within schools. I should note that the timelines vary for each of those states. New Jersey, for instance, is going to be looking at March 7th. And so part of the plan with that is we should start to see some warmer temperatures, which could allow for greater ventilation. Governor Murphy also pointed to the case rate numbers across the country, COVID-19 cases dropping by more than 60% over the past 2 weeks. So certainly a positive sign. Here's more from the governor earlier this week.
And perhaps most importantly, this is a huge step back to normalcy for our kids. We're not going to manage COVID to zero. We have to learn how to live with COVID as we move from a pandemic to the endemic phase of this virus.
So just because the states have announced that masks won't be required in schools doesn't mean that all of the local leaders will be following that direction. Newark, the largest school district in New Jersey, for instance, says it will keep its mask mandate in place. And this comes, as you heard at the top, from the director of the CDC saying now is really not the moment to be rolling back mask mandates within public places or schools. There are still concerns. The CDC says 99% of counties in the U.S. are considered to be at high levels of transmission. So, guys, still a lot to consider.
All right, Emily Aketa, thank you so much.
Let's now bring in senior scholar at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, Dr. Amish Adalja. Dr. Adalja, always great to have you with us. So a couple questions for you here on this mask mandate debate that we're seeing happen across the country. So we heard CDC Director Walensky say that guidance has not changed for masks. She actually said she recommends universal masking, but then we're seeing states, Connecticut, New Jersey, Oregon, Delaware, make these other changes. So two questions for you here. What is your take on if it's too early to be removing masks or not? But also, what do you make of this confusion and this sort of piecemeal guidance across the country as the CDC guidance does not change?
I do think that there are good indicators that we can start to move out of this emergency phase. This isn't the beginning of the pandemic. We have vaccines, we've got immunity from prior infection, we've got antivirals, we've got monoclonal antibodies, we've got rapid tests. So I do think that allows us to get rid of sort of the mandates and the government issued recommendations or requirements on masks. But obviously individuals can continue to mask even if your state doesn't have a mask mandate. And many states don't have a mask mandate. We're sort of focusing on certain blue states, but many red states have not had mask mandates throughout this pandemic. And remember, one-way masking works. So I think we can do this. I think it's going to individually become a risk calculation that people make on their own, whether they want to wear a mask or whether they don't want to wear a mask. But certainly it is confusing when you have different states doing different things and the CDC guidance sort of lagging where people are and sort of sticking to what they think is best, but not really realizing that people aren't actually following that anymore. So the guidance is being overcome by events.
Absolutely. I think it's a good point, too, that you make that some states haven't had these mandates. You know, we kind of get this confusion whipped up as these new rules change, but that has been the case in some places across the country. Doctor, you also mentioned the very smart point that you can always put a mask on yourself if that's what's going to make you comfortable. So let's walk through the basics of that for a moment. Will a mask protect someone if they're wearing one, but no one else in the room is wearing a mask? I mean, what's that look like protection-wise? And is that still this option that parents, students, or teachers who don't feel comfortable removing them in their classroom can rely on for safety?
It's definitely an option. One-way masking works, especially if you're wearing a well-fitting mask. So an N95 or KN95, those type of equivalents. Remember, that's what we always do in the hospitals. Our patients aren't wearing masks. We're wearing masks. So one-way masking definitely protects the wearer. And that's what people need to think about doing if they're somebody that has less risk tolerance and is really worrying about getting COVID-19 or any other respiratory virus. And that's especially true for the immunosuppressed populations.
All right, Dr. Amish Adalja, thank you so much for walking us through this. Great to have you with us. And if you have a question for one of our doctors, please do let us know.
Hey, you can email us at morningnewsnow@nbcuni.com with your questions and let us know if you want to stay anonymous. Now to the crisis in Eastern Europe, where fresh efforts are underway to rein in tensions between Russia and Ukraine and avert war. Yesterday, French President Emmanuel Macron met with his Ukrainian counterpart one day after holding talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin. Macron said Putin assured him that Russia would not escalate the crisis any further. However, the Kremlin later denied that Paris and Moscow had struck any deals. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley is in eastern Ukraine for us, and our White House correspondent Mike Memoli is in Washington. Good morning to both of you, Matt. Let's start with you. Macron seemed to strike an upbeat tone on the progress of de-escalation. But how about Ukraine's President Zelensky? What's the reality on the ground there?
Yeah, I mean, Zelensky was actually pretty positive as well. He said that he is putting some stock in these talks. And, you know, the big thing is tomorrow, and that's where we're going to see the so-called Normandy format, or the Normandy 4 countries getting together. That's France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine. That's going to be in Berlin. It follows on another meeting of the Normandy format from 2 weeks ago. So, you know, there's some optimism here because we also heard from President Zelensky and from Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, that they're actually both a little bit optimistic about the prospects of these talks because they want to see the so-called Minsk agreements revived, resurrected. Those were moribund agreements, not because they weren't agreed to, but because nobody seemed to understand what they meant even after they had been agreed to. So now it looks like they're breathing new life into the Minsk agreements, and that could possibly see something like a resolution to this in the coming days. But I got to tell you guys, diplomacy up till now has done almost nothing, and there is a lot of pessimism that diplomacy can do more, especially given the fact that there are so many different interweaving tracks of diplomacy going on, all these different countries meeting, trying to hash out different agreements. And we keep hearing from Dmitry Peskov, he's the spokesperson for the Kremlin, that, when we heard from Macron just yesterday saying, or excuse me, I think it was 2 days ago, saying that he was optimistic that he had gotten some assurances from Vladimir Putin, well, Dmitry Peskov just poured cold water on all of that. Guys?
So this is clearly a Western effort. Mike, you co-wrote an article for NBCNews.com about some frank assessments that President Biden is said to have made about certain European allies during this crisis. What are some of those comments? What has the administration made of Macron's diplomatic blitz this week?
Well, Joe, one of the most interesting sort of dynamics as President Biden is dealing with a very complicated and kinetic foreign policy challenge is the fact that for President Biden, who spent decades engaged in diplomacy as a senator, as vice president, and now president, many of the players involved at this point are ones that he doesn't have the kind of relationships that he spent decades building. And he's offered some frank assessments, especially of some of our allies. Boris Johnson, the UK prime minister, is blustery. French President Emmanuel Macron is trying to be Charles de Gaulle. Olaf Scholz, the new chancellor of Germany, is no Angela Merkel. These are some of the comments we've heard the president has made. But my favorite has to be his assessment of Vladimir Putin, which is he's a guy with nukes, but not a lot of friends. As far as Macron's diplomacy, the White House is welcoming it, but they haven't gotten really a full readout. President Biden expects to get one directly from President Macron in the coming days.
So, Matt, as we mentioned, Ukraine is skeptical about these so-called assurances that Macron has received from Putin. Are the Ukrainians satisfied with the progress of these talks, or do they think more should be done?
Yeah, I mean, they say they are. And then we heard from President Zelensky that he's actually looking forward to these talks. As I mentioned, the Normandy 4 that's going to be meeting tomorrow in Berlin. There's some optimism there. It seems as though diplomacy is still the right track, and that's what we've been hearing time and time again from President Zelensky, that he still is holding out hope that diplomacy could solve this crisis. And again, there's a lot of diplomacy. There's a lot of this going around. So maybe there could be some daylight given all of these talks going on. And when I've spoken in the past to some diplomats here in Ukraine, they've said, as long as the diplomats are talking, the guns are silent. And that's the situation right now. The guns are silent. But some are saying that as long as Russia is talking, as long as mouths are moving, Russia is moving more armaments to the front line, more ships down into the Black Sea, south of where I am. And that's very much a reality. So it's hard to tell. For a lot of European leaders, this diplomacy is a positive sign, but there's a lot of skepticism that for Russia, it's just a pretext for arming up. Guys?
And Mike, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has landed a different part of the globe, Australia, for meetings with Indo-Pacific foreign leaders. Quickly, how high on the agenda is the Ukraine crisis likely to be?
Well, Joe, obviously that meeting is about an alliance primarily countering China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. But as Secretary of State Blinken said it was a very long flight to Australia, and a lot of the time on that plane was dealing with the Ukraine crisis. He called it front and center still, even with a busy agenda down in Australia.
All right, Matt, Mike, thank you both. Appreciate it.
On Capitol Hill, key Republican leader is breaking ranks with his party and former President Trump. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is sounding off after the Republican National Committee characterized the events of January 6th as, quote, legitimate political discourse.
What happened January the 6th, and we're here. We saw what happened. It was a violent insurrection for the purpose of trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power after a legitimately certified election from one administration to the next. That's what it was.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now. Hi, Leanne. Good morning. So McConnell's the latest Republican to denounce the RNC, and this has to do with censuring Representatives Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger over their involvement in the January 6th investigation. His comments stand in stark contrast, though, to what other Republican leaders have said, right? I mean, walk us through this.
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. This is the strongest rebuke we've heard so far from Republicans over the RNC actions over the weekend. Now, a lot of Senate Republicans that I've been canvassing over the past couple of days have been really uncomfortable with what the RNC did. But the fact that Leader McConnell came out so strongly calling January 6th a violent insurrection and an attempt to interrupt a peaceful transfer of power sent a very strong signal of where he stands and also the divisions among the party. He also had more to say about the RNC's role and what they did to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Let's listen.
With regard to the suggestion that the RNC should be in the business of picking and choosing Republicans who ought to be supported, traditionally the view of the National Party committees is that we support all members of our party, regardless of their positions on some issues. The issue is whether or not the RNC should be sort of singling out members of our party who may have different views from the majority. That's not the job of the RNC.
So Leader McConnell with very strong words, which, as you mentioned, is a stark contrast from other Republicans. GOP leader McCarthy over in the House refused to answer questions all day long from reporters, avoiding them, being silent, would not talk about it. As we know, he has singled out one of his members, Liz Cheney, by removing her from leadership months ago, Savannah.
Yeah. Leanne, I know that you also have some new reporting on the communication between former President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence on January 6th. What are you learning?
Yeah, so we're learning that the January 6th committee is understanding a lot more of the former president's day on January 6th through testimony and through records from the National Archives. Now, this might seem like a very insignificant detail, but it's very important to the committee. The fact that the former president tried multiple times to reach Mike Pence on the morning of January 6th. Eventually, they did finally connect, and they connected during an Oval Office meeting that was very, very tense, where Donald Trump tried to pressure Mike Pence in changing the election results, something that Mike Pence ultimately did not do. We're also learning that with that new phone call that we learned about last week with Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, the one that was 10 minutes on the morning of January 6th, we now know that that phone call happened because the former president, again, wanted to talk to Jim Jordan. So we know that Donald Trump was on the phone wanting to talk to people that morning of January 6th, and the committee is understanding more of who Donald Trump spoke to on that day.
All right, Leanne Caldwell, lots to get through there. Thank you so much.
Team USA has finally won its first gold medal at this year's Olympics.
How fun our background is now. Lindsay Jacob Ellis took home the gold in the women's snowboard cross-country event, delivering the first gold medal for Team USA, and it's also her first gold medal in her 5th Olympic appearance.
NBC News correspondent Gadi Schwartz joins us now with more on Team USA's first gold medal and the latest headlines from these games. So, Gadi, let's start with Lindsay Jacob Ellis, her gold medal run in the snowboard cross. How big of a win is this for this long-time, 5-time Olympian, and really just for Team USA in general?
Yeah, this is such a big win for Lindsay Jacob Ellis, and finally a huge first gold for Team USA. But for Lindsay, she's been a world champion 4 times. She's won 7 X Games. That gold has always been right outside her grasp. And for the 36-year-old, this win is a total redemption story for one of the most memorable Olympic mistakes made way back in 2016. You see, back then, she was in the clear lead on the track. She decided to grab her board over the final run to give it a little bit of flair, and then she caught an edge, crashed to the shock of everyone watching, then scrambled to finish in silver. This year, though, she lasered in on the finish, finally seizing the one medal she still didn't have as the most decorated woman in that sport. Not to mention the first gold for Team USA in Beijing, guys.
All right, Gadi, now I have to ask you about less happy news, and this is just one of those ones that we're so sad to talk about, but let's talk about Mikaela Shiffrin, one of Team USA's biggest stars. She had another disappointing performance in the slalom event. Walk us through what happened with Shiffrin and what the rest of her time in Beijing looks like here and what we've heard from her.
Yeah, it is just so hard to say right now what's going on inside Mikaela Shiffrin's head. It's the first disappointment that we saw earlier in the week seemed like such a fluke. She was such an uncharacteristic mistake. She's usually got nerves of steel. She's won more gold, more World Cups than anyone else in the sport. She was a favorite to win gold here, but earlier she hit a gate, did not finish the race. Then just seconds after starting in what was supposed to be her second gold medal attempt, again, she skied out to another heartbreaking did not finish. This time she was sitting in the snow with her head held down for 20 minutes talking after the event. She was pretty honest. She said that she didn't know what went wrong. She might be pushing too hard. She wanted to reset better before the next competitions, but she just didn't know how because she's never been in this position before. And when she was asked about the next events, she was kind of non-committal, saying, if I'm just going to ski out of the 5th gate, what's the point? But she is still scheduled to compete in 3 more events, so fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We're pushing for her.
Yeah.
Gotti, we have to talk about snowboarding. We saw both Shaun White and Chloe Kim taking flight in the half pipe for Team USA. These were qualifying runs, so how did both stars do?
Phenomenal. Simply put, both Shaun White, Chloe Kim are the greatest male and female snowboarders of all time. Shaun White has pioneered so much of the sport. He's got more gold under his belt than any other snowboarder, but he's also 35. He's got more years of taking those big air falls, massive tolls on his body. And these games, he's playing defense against the younger, more aggressive snowboarders that have tricks that some he still hasn't landed. But he did qualify. He came in 4th. He knows exactly what he needs to do to finish on the podium. Meanwhile, Chloe Kim, she continues to just make that half pipe look so breezy. And remember, this is a sport where you have 2 chances. You get to keep the best score of 2 runs. She always seems to somehow make the first run count. She coasts into dominance, and that was the same during this year. It was the same back in her debut in Pyeongchang. She's dropping jaws left and right. And then I do want to mention, she took almost 2 years off to go to Princeton, came back, won literally every competition since. She is an undefeated world champion, undefeated Olympian. Both her and Shaun are going to be going for gold coming up tomorrow night in primetime.
Can't wait to see that. My goodness.
Yeah. And Gotti, I will say, you were an early fan of Chloe Kim, so you can wear that badge proudly. I remember that from years ago. So there you go. You were right.
Yeah, Chloe Kim and all the health food that she eats.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Gotti.
Also, 35's not that old. Right.
Yeah, it's really not. It's so crazy, this world.
Yeah. Gotti Schwartz, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gotti. Now, one of our Team USA athletes in action earlier today was snowboarder Lucas Foster.
The 22-year-old took part in qualifying at the men's snowboard halfpipe event we were just talking about, but came up a bit short after a crash, finishing 17th in the event.
Lucas Foster joins us now from Beijing. Lucas, good morning from here in the States. Thanks so much for making time to talk to us, and we're glad you're okay. So walk us through your qualifying round. What happened?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. The first run, I landed, but kind of lost my rhythm on the second to last hit, and then had to opt out for just a smaller trick than what I was planning on doing. So the first run didn't really go to plan, and then second run, everything was going well. Felt like one of the best runs that I've ever done, and then came up short on the deck on a frontside 1260 and just clipped and fell to the bottom, and it was a rough fall, but luckily I'm all right. And yeah, it's disappointing for sure. But you know, you got to take the positives, and there's a lot to be thankful for still. So.
Absolutely.
This is your first Olympics. I mean, what's the experience been like so far? Are you looking forward to more down the road?
For sure. Yeah, I think after, you know, the contest not going well for me, I'm definitely fired up and motivated. And the experience has been really cool. They've done a great job with the Olympic Village, and just everything out here has been really cool. And I'm excited to, you know, be a part of it and to experience the games. It's been a dream of mine for a long time. So.
Oh, and we're so proud of you, and it's so exciting that you are there. You're at the Olympics. What's next for you? When do you head home, and what's next?
I think I'm going home on Sunday, so I'm excited to go home and visit with my family, go home to Telluride, and just go snowboard away from the halfpipe for a little bit. It's been a long season, and I'm excited to just take a big breather and reset. And then, yeah, you know, we keep doing our halfpipe stuff, you know, when there's not an Olympic year. So I'm excited to just, you know, keep things going.
Absolutely.
Get ready for Italy and do all the things in between.
Yeah. Italy. Yeah. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And burst out of that bubble right now.
Yeah. Lucas, and Telluride, a gorgeous place to get to go home to. Oh, my goodness. All right, Lucas, thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you, guys.
Time to get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Bill Cairns joins us now. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. And the nuttiest thing about halfpipe, what Lucas does and all the people that you're showing is, I mean, they go off the lip and they're up 12 feet in the air, and then they come back down, and if they hit that lip, they can get so hurt. It's like the falls. It just makes me nervous watching that. But, yeah.
So you're saying is you want the three of us to
Us.
give it a shot for a story, is what you're saying, right?
I don't even think that. I don't think there's no way. There's no way. We'd all be in the hospital beds next to each other. We'd have to get a room for three.
We know that that's true for me. You, on the other hand, are an Iron Man. I don't know. I kind of want to see you try.
That means nothing at all. Gravity and hard snow and no way. All right, it's exciting to watch. Shaun White, can't wait for that in primetime too. All right, so let's get into this forecast, and it is a quiet but warm, eerie forecast. We are under our heat advisories in Los Angeles in February for one of the first times that anyone ever remembers. Up to 90 degrees as possible, and it's not like this is one day. This is going to be from today all the way through the weekend. So whenever you see yellow and reds on the map, that means you're much warmer than normal. We could be 84 today in downtown LA, 83 San Luis Obispo, even San Francisco, about 71. Tomorrow, numerous records likely again. It's like, broken records, rinse and repeat, 86. And then look at all the way into the weekend. Friday, LA, 87. Saturday, 89. And Sunday, of course, is the Super Bowl. And we're going to be in the 89. Of course, the Super Bowl happens a little later in the day, 6:30 Eastern time, 3:30 local time. It looks to be sunny and very warm, right around 84 degrees at SoFi Stadium. As far as the top 5 warmest Super Bowl evers, this will be close. In 1973, you have to go all the way back to Super Bowl 7 in Los Angeles. It was 85 degrees. So it's going to be interesting to see if usually the cold weather has an effect on the Super Bowl. This one, you may see like people drinking extra water and fans on the sidelines trying to keep the players cool.
Yeah, they'll be begging for those Gatorade baths throughout the entire game. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Bill. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.